Welcome to another In Wheel Time podcast, a 30-minute mini version of the In Wheel Time car show that airs live every Saturday morning, 8 to 11 a.m. Central. Podcast channel. Live from Studio A, it's the In Wheel Time car talk show. Coming up, we speak with CEO of Pontosense, a company that develops sensors for your vehicle. Conrad's going to have the In Wheel Time car clinic, and we'll have this week's auto news. Howdy, along with Mike Out of This World Mars, King Conrad DeLong. We always need more Jeff Zekin. I'm Don Armstrong. Glad you could join us on this Saturday. Boy, we had some big thunderstorms here yesterday. Not here, but about a mile from here.
Yeah, I didn't get a drop, but they said my office up in the Woodlands got hammered.
Yeah, we got nothing. So, Alex, how do you pronounce your last name?
Good morning, guys.
Good morning. How do you pronounce your last name?
Yeah, it's pronounced chi.
Chi.
Like the energy inside the body. Yeah,
chi. Even though it's spelled Q-I.
Well, they made it complicated on purpose, I'm sure.
So, Alex, accomplished visionary industry leader with relentless passion for revolutionizing the automotive landscape, chief executive officer at Pontosense. Tell us what Pontosense is and how you started this thing.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. First of all, I hope you guys are staying dry. I know what it feels like to be in a thunderstorm. It's not always pleasant.
Yeah, exactly.
But we focus on in-cabin safety. So we built a sensor that can measure movements, if you believe it or not, as small as a heartbeat. So just for those keeping, science at home there, it's 0.2 to 0.3 millimeters that we can measure. And for reference there, a grain of salt is 0.3 millimeters. So we're measuring movements on your body as small as 0.3 millimeters in a vibrating environment from maybe a meter or so away.
This is truly amazing. I had no clue. So what would you use a sensor for something like that for?
Well, it's a great question because there's a use case right now, and there's also a use case that they're looking at going forward. The use case right now is really a safety use case, right? So it's like an airbag kind of safety device. But the issue in the States is that, a child every week on average dies from being left alone in a hot car.
Absolutely.
Right. This is a big issue that I'm sure you guys have heard a lot about. Yep. So we are the first sensor in the world to be able to pass Euro NCAP regulations for in-cabin safety for child left behind. But the interesting thing for a lot of these OEMs going forward is going to be, what this technology can really bring as an addition. And that's really around a lot of driver monitoring, passenger monitoring. By analyzing the metrics within vital signs, we can understand, your drowsiness, motion sickness, alcohol consumption, things like that. But it's really meant to keep you safe. So, this is integrated into systems that allow, for example, a telecommunications company to reach out to me and say, hey, listen, are you okay to drive? We'll keep an eye on you. So, so if something does happen, we'll get someone out there, as soon as we can. So these are just safety features going forward that OEMs that we work with are looking into.
Well, one of the first things that comes to my mind is the fact that there's a lot of bad PR right now about, Big Brother looking over your shoulder and all of the information that the car is giving manufacturers or the government or whoever it is that has access to this stuff. But let me just say this. I fly in a helicopter pretty much every day. And I will tell you that in a helicopter, I want somebody looking after me. And the ramifications of the information that your car supplies is pertinent to me, that you have information being sent somewhere about your behavior behind the wheel. If you're drunk, I don't want to be anywhere around you.
Yeah, because just because they're sensing you doesn't mean you're not impacting others.
Right. And everybody takes it so personally, but when you get behind the wheel of a vehicle of any kind, you're putting everybody else at risk.
In jeopardy.
Based on your behavior. And that's where you guys come in.
Absolutely. And I think also, just to add on top of that, right, the other way they're doing it already today is with cameras. And listen, I sing in the car and probably do even weirder things in the car. So you want to have a privacy because I don't care if it's you or somebody else, right? I just care that somebody behind the wheel is going through something. And there's a lot of things that car companies will do today, like, I think, OnStar and those type of things as well, that will check in on you, just make sure you're safe. I think that's really the main thing. And I'd rather have something check in on me that's privacy protecting than something that's going to record my audio and video at the same time. So I think you're absolutely right. It's keeping yourself safe. It's keeping other people safe. And that's kind of where things are going, especially as the car becomes autonomous, right? If you hand back an L3 type of vehicle on the highway, and you're motion sick like crazy, are you going to be able to take back that control? Those are just different things that OEMs are aware of these days.
Yeah, because I don't think that most people realize that cars today are a lot different than they were just a few years ago.
Oh, yeah.
And matter of fact, I'm driving a car right now. It's a beautiful car, and I'm going to review it in a couple of weeks, but I will tell you that the car is brand new. Yeah, I mean, it's only got a couple thousand miles on it. However, the technology that's in the dashboard is old. I've got 2 video screens in there. One is for the navigation on it. The rest of it is for the audio, the infotainment system down below. Who does that anymore? Nobody does that anymore. And that car is a relatively new car as far as development is concerned. So things moving along at a really fast pace.
Well, and think about it. Now you have car manufacturers that are advertising, oh, take your hands off the steering wheel and let the car drive for you, and now, you're not active, and that's where your sensors are going to come in as far as, monitoring who the driver is and what they're doing, and are they truly paying attention? I know the OEMs talk about, we have these eyelid sensors out there that are they're watching you, but yours is much more intense level of monitoring the physical movement and motion of the passenger and driver of the vehicle.
And it doesn't know who you are. Like, it doesn't need to know who you are, right? I think that's, listen, if I'm driving and someone's watching my eyelids, I'm not feeling great, right? So, but really, I think also it breaks down to kind of what these car companies are looking into, right? Because I think, you mentioned all these technologies going into vehicles, and I absolutely agree. They only move for 2 different reasons, right? They only move because the government tells them to move, or they move because they can, make more profit. Right. And, there's a big push towards multi-use sensors. So instead of having a weight sensor, an airbag sensor, a privacy sensor, all these different things, why don't you just have one sensor that covers everything, right? So that's kind of where, as we deploy into vehicles, and we just confirmed another 200,000 on the road. But as we deploy more into vehicles, the multi-use piece of it is really, really critical, because they gotta make some money. And right now, this is maybe a timely point, but right now it's what's happening with the UAW, of course, and everything that people are seeing around the country. Profit questions are going to come into play, and if they can make more money, and they can give some of that money to the unions and the workers as well, then everybody wins in the end. So profit is a big part of it as well for these large car companies.
Well, and in what you're building, you just talked about is, why have 17 different sensors in a car that all kind of trying to do one thing, where that requires 17 different SKUs or 17 different part numbers, where your sensors can be one sensor that's going to be able to do multiple tasks and eliminate those other 17 that are in the car, simplify it in production, simplify it in inventory as well. That there's a cost savings to the OEMs on that. Are you already working with some of the OEMs?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we launched in Europe first as our first market. There's a bunch of EVs working with it there as well. The ICEs are just a couple years behind, but they'll get there as well. We're doing about 200,000. There's a bunch of metrics now that we're estimating how many lives we've saved with this technology in terms of children, things like that as well. So we're actually absolutely hoping to do more, and the entire production process in automotive used to be like 5 to 7 years. Right? They used to plan for like a model in like 2030 or something, but now they shortened that to about 1 to 2 years. So you will see a lot of these, life-saving, child-saving, driver-saving type of technology in the market sooner than later.
What are you working on today?
Today, we're building a lot of AI into the system. So what we mean by that is, we collect a lot of, your vitals, again, all anonymous, all privacy protected, all locally stored. We don't use cloud computing. We don't use any of that kind of stuff. So it's all kind of housed within the vehicle itself. But if I tell you your heartbeat, that's not going to give you any information, right? I need to tell you more about, hey, are you at risk for a certain type of accident? And I think that's something that we are actively working on here in Ontario. We've got a couple of offices in Toronto, in London, Ontario, and Waterloo, and also with our AI lab in Tokyo, is all kind of putting these pieces together where, instead of saying your heartbeat's 65, that doesn't tell you anything. But let me tell you, hey, you have a 30% chance that that you're going to fall asleep in the next 2 hours if you keep on this drive. And that's kind of what that predictive analysis is going to be able to bring. And
so how do you get to that? I mean, I understand that your sensors are much more attuned to what's going on. I mean, I'm envisioning you actually being able to tell if I stop breathing behind the wheel.
Yeah.
I mean, because my chest isn't moving or anything like that. So if I just held my breath, you would pick it up, but you wouldn't know exactly why. And I could see that maybe, okay, this guy's not breathing, so I'm going to shut the car down, or I'm going to do something to kind of help that situation. Is that kind of where you're headed?
You could be talking, and that's also, you can't breathe and talk at the same time. So there's different reasons why you're doing those things. But I'll tell you guys, the honest transparency is that the key metric you're looking at is something called HRV. So HRV stands for heart rate variability. It's the time and space between each heartbeat. And that's, in humans, that's the fight or flight response. So to answer your question, we're looking at a bunch of different metrics. And I kind of, tune it to like WebMD, is that you could be not breathing for a lot of different reasons. Some of the reasons are good reasons, right? You're relaxed, you're talking, you're having a conversation, you're not breathing. But as we go down those different things, we can then start to narrow down and understand, again, at a very high level, what is something that could be a potential risk in the vehicle.
So your sensor could pick up somebody who's having a heart attack.
We technically, yes, but we would not use that as a use case because for a lot of car companies, that's a little bit risky. I think that's coming down the pipeline. That's in the roadmap, but it's not something we're doing in the next couple of years, just because, as you can probably imagine, that's something that is going to cause, quite a bit of risk for the car companies. What we're doing for the first one, I'll give you the exact use case. It's going to be stress and comfort. You've had a rough day. You're coming back from the office. You're not feeling great. Your heartbeat, HRV, all these different metrics we have are a little bit off. Let us turn on that, whirlpool seating in your Porsche vehicle, and you're going to have a nicer ride home than you did when you're at the office. I think that's the first stage, is that comfort level, safety level. And then you get into more about that drowsiness, attention, cognitive attention, alcohol detection. In some states, maybe, even marijuana detection as well. So those are things that then, again, you're not stopping the car because that's very dangerous. But you're letting something like OnStar know. You're letting something like those systems know that, okay, there might be a risk there. Let's keep a closer eye on this person.
So would you incorporate this with any of the insurance companies?
That is part of it. That is part of it. And I think, there is, I would say, a tug of war right now in this industry. I'm sure you guys have heard it as well, is previously we all got our insurance from Allstate, State Farm, Farmers, all these different insurance companies. Right. But looking forward in the future, you may be getting your insurance from Ford and GM. And there's a reason for that. And there's a way that they are going to work together with the insurance companies to make that happen. But these are things where, we are not a company that's going to impact that ourselves directly. They have their own plans. But I really think that you need to see your premiums go down. There is a case study that came out where, if you switch to an OEM-based insurance, your insurance could decrease by as much as 40% every single month, which is nice to have.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
So I think, there is this danger. I'm concerned. People are concerned that your insurance are going to go up because, hey, you're constantly stressed when you're driving, and that may be causing your insurance to go up. And then those are things that, we as an organization want to make sure that we're capturing, again, it's, potentially private and anonymous so that it doesn't know it's you as well. And you can keep those, rates a little bit lower as well going forward. It's all about repair costs, timely. I live in Canada, guys. I mean, we have a lot of snow here. I crashed my tires. It took me a month to get new tires. So insurance wise, I think you'll see a streamlining of that industry in the next 5 to 10 years.
Wow.
I mean, the ramifications of that knowledge are unbelievable. We're talking about Jetsons kind of stuff here.
Absolutely. I mean, besides the flying cars and the talking dogs, absolutely. I think this is where we're going, right? So, but you got to keep people safe. You got to keep people safe, and you can't shut down cars. You can't make cars not start because they detect alcohol in the vehicle. You just cannot have those things happen, because there was a case, I think, a couple years ago, where someone was assaulted and she ran into the vehicle and tried to get the vehicle to start, and it wouldn't start because it detected something. Those are just cases you can't have that.
They also have the vehicles that you can't start unless you have a breathalyzer test. That's on the other side of that, though.
That's a court-ordered thing.
Right.
Did you ever watch Cujo?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So right now, your market is occupant detection in the rear of the vehicle. That's kind of where you're selling at the moment.
That is what the house on fire problem is going to be, right? In the U.S., it's going to come, in 2025, probably after the 2024 election. But in Europe, it's already happening. In China and Japan and around the world, it's already happening as well. So that, to your point there, that's like the government mandated, house on fire. You got to have this going forward type of situation. But these car companies are smart. They're run by really intelligent people. So they're thinking, okay, I'll put this in if you want, but I want to do other things as well. And that's kind of where we talk about this aspect of driver safety and monitoring as well.
Interesting.
How cool.
I'm just... There's all kinds of questions, you want to ask.
Go ahead and ask.
Well, there again, you mentioned privacy a couple of times. I understand the safety aspects to make sure that there's no children or somebody left in the back seat, and I'm not sure how all that works, but I don't need to know how. I just know that it works. But there was an example on one of the news shows here recently about stuff that people did in their back seat of their car and how it might be considered to be a privacy issue.
Well, yeah, I believe that it was Tesla that was spying on people having sex in the back of their car.
What?
And they were showing it to the people that they worked. Hey, man, come over here and check this out.
Yeah, see what this couple's doing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So that's what he's talking about, all the privacy issues and the concerns.
You gotta get around that, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't want any of my video recorded. I don't want any of my audio recorded, frankly.
So the gentleman's right.
So
it's almost like David Hasselhoff and you're turning the car into KIT.
Yeah.
As far as its level of understanding what the driver needs and what the passenger needs are, as well as the propulsion of the vehicle.
What does NCAP mean in European language?
It's a new car assessment program, so it provides a safety rating for how safe your vehicle is. So
Do we have that here in the United States? Something similar to it?
We have American NCAP here in the U.S.
I see, American NCAP. Okay, and who controls those regulations? Is it the government?
There's a bunch of people wearing ties over in Washington and Detroit making those into mandates. So there is a governing body for those type of things here in the U.S.
So you have to deal with them.
I would say that in this case, our interests are aligned. I think they also want to keep people safe on the road and
sure,
in hot vehicles. So generally, they have a guideline. But what is more, interesting is that actually car companies have much stricter guidelines than NCAP in many cases. So I'll give you an example. So in the FDA, right? If your device can measure heart rate accurate to plus minus 10 beats per minute. So if it's 65, really, but you're registering anywhere between 55 and 75, that is FDA cleared and that's ready to go. That's what Apple Watch does, right? But OEMs, they need plus minus 5, right? They need a much more accurate system for their vehicles. So I would say the NCAP is one of those hurdles you have to get through. But OEMs are really the ones that's setting a much stricter regulation, and they're run by very smart people that have a view on these things that go in the future as well. So I would say that actually we work closer with the OEMs and the car companies to make sure that we fit what they need and it just so happens we'll also clear the in-cap requirements.
Well, Alex, you are truly one of the smartest people that we've ever had on the program. We're not worthy, but where can we find out more information about Pontosense?
You can check out our website at pontosense.com. So that's pontosense.com. We also have an email, so contact@pontosense.com as well. We'd love to hear from you guys. We'd love to hear from the audience as well, because I do think that there is a new era now of innovation within the U.S. automakers, and with what's happening right now with the UAW and things like that. I know that's tugging and pulling on different strings there, but I do think that there's a really bright future for this industry in the U.S., and we're happy to be a part of it.
But
and thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thank you. Truly a fascinating conversation. We appreciate it. Let's stay in touch. Hope to talk to you again soon.
Absolutely, folks. Have a nice day, and stay dry in the thunderstorm there.
Thank you.
Alex Cheeve, the CEO of Pontosense.
Very cool.
A look into the future.
Yeah,
no doubt. All right, time now on the In-Wheel Time Car Talk Show for Conrad's Car Clinic. We're still talking about fluids.
Last week we talked about transmission fluid and how the color is pretty important indicator of what's going on. Well, the same thing with brake fluid. Brake fluid should typically, when it's new, be like an amber color, a very light tan, maybe even to the point of being clear. And the reason they use brake fluid is it's what I call a force multiplier. It's the physics of hydraulics. If I have a 2-inch piston and I move it 1 inch through a line on the other end, and it doesn't matter how far away it can be, and in a car it could be 12, 14 feet away, a 1-inch piston is going to move 2 inches. So all of that force multiplying so that when I step on the brakes happen. So the fluid's a critical part of how that functions. You want to make sure that the fluid is clean. You want to make sure that the fluid's not contaminated. Brake fluid itself is hygroscopic. It's always wanting to absorb a little bit of moisture. So opening and closing your brake cap all the time is a bad thing to do, because just a little bit of humidity in there can impact that. Brake fluid has to not just transmit hydraulic force, it also has to withstand pretty high amounts of heat. If you think about a pickup truck pulling off the highway, coming up to a stop sign, those brake rotors could be 600, 700, 800 degrees
red hot.
And they're inches away from 4 or 5 ounces of brake fluid inside your caliper. So that radiating heat is going to generate the heat inside the fluid.
Yeah.
So we talked earlier before we got on the air about DOT 3 fluid.
Yep.
Department of Transportation Standard 3, that's DOT 3, is a boiling point of 400 degrees. So the fluid, when it boils, that becomes a problem, because now all of a sudden we've introduced air pockets in the brake fluid, and that's where that spongy pedal comes. The other problem is once it starts to absorb moisture, what happens to water at 212 degrees? It turns to steam. Mm-hmm. Now, that steam also creates a soft or a spongy brake pedal. If you watch your brake fluid color, that's going to give you an indication of when it needs to be replaced. But manufacturers know what's going on. As brake fluid becomes old, it becomes corrosive. And one of the things brake fluid does is, as it becomes corrosive, it begins to leach copper out of the inside of the system, whether it's copper out of the analog braking system or copper out of the metallized fuel or brake lines that are in the vehicle. And you see people will go in with like a little test strip to test your brake fluid. They're actually measuring the parts per million of copper. The funny thing is, Honda cars, when their brake fluid gets old, it turns green. Well, what color does copper turn
green
when it corrodes?
Yep.
Green. So it's a good indication that your brake fluid needs to be changed when it starts to turn green. But different manufacturers tell you to change the fluid at different intervals, and I never really understand why everybody's variance. A lot of the Europeans say every 20,000 to 24,000 miles or every 2 years. A lot of the Asian imports will tell you every 30,000 miles. GM says every 45,000 miles you should change your brake fluid. Ford doesn't ever tell you to change your brake fluid at all. Mopar doesn't ever tell you to change your brake fluid at all. They all basically use a very similar fluid. So as the fluid ages, it needs to be changed.
What's the difference between regular, like a .3, and silicone fluid, and can you mix the two?
You cannot mix the two at all. Silicone fluid's going to have a boiling temperature generally north of 600 degrees. .3 is the factory fill for 99% of the vehicles out there. Yeah. And then there's also a .4 fluid, which has a boiling point of above 500 degrees. So the .4 fluid, you really don't see that as factory fill anywhere, but there's a lot of places that will put .4 fluid, which is totally interchangeable with .3. But silicone brake fluid really does not exist from an OEM. That's purely on a race car. And we could talk to Richard. How often does he change brake fluid? Probably every time he races a car, he puts fresh brake fluid in it. Why? Because he has to depend on the fluid doing what it's designed to do. So you always want to have fresh, new fortified fluid inside the vehicle. So again, light amber color is normal. As it begins to darken, it's time to think about it. If it gets black, you should have replaced it already. And it'll get so black, it'll stain the inside of the reservoir. Mm-hmm. And once that happens, the only way to clean that reservoir is basically to replace it. You can't put any cleaner inside of a brake fluid. Brake fluid, you don't want to intermix with anything at all because it'll affect its performance.
Wow. Very interesting. Yeah. So I'm glad that I had my Corvette brake fluid changed a couple of years ago. Mm-hmm. Because it never had been, and the car's 20 years old.
Right. And with that, you also have the clutch fluid. In a manual transmission with a hydraulic clutch, that's basically brake fluid that's in there that's also exposed to pretty high temperatures down there at the clutch. So you want to make sure you're changing that clutch fluid.
I just went ahead and changed the clutch.
Yep.
So with the clutch change, there goes the fluid.
Right,
and now it's got a little valve down there that it didn't have before.
That makes it easier to change
the fluid.
Right.
Yeah. Fluid flush,
Very good.
as it were. Thank you.
Fluid valve.
Okay. Time now for a quick break, and then we'll start the top of the next hour. Our next guest is already here and standing by. So stay with us. Quick break on the In Wheel Time Car Talk Show. The original group of Lupi Tortilla restaurants will have you telling your family and friends just what the original recipes mean when it comes to the best fajitas in Southeast Texas. Founder Stan Holt invites you to visit the original Lupi Tortilla near I-10 and Highway 6. Here's the original house that inspired the design of all the rest and the original charm that helped make Lupi Tortilla the go-to destination for Houston Tex-Mex. Speaking of original, nothing can compete with the original lime pepper marinade that everyone will agree makes Lupi Tortilla award-winning beef fajitas the best anywhere. Lupi Tortilla Katy is another location that gives you the same quality and service Houstonians have come to expect at Lupi's. It's located just off I-10 and the Grand Parkway at Kingsland Boulevard in Katy. Find yourself in Aggie Land? Head to the Lupi Tortilla in College Station, located just around the corner from Kyle Field. It's a great place to enjoy those famous frozen margaritas before or after the game. Headed east to Louisiana, stop in at the Lupi Tortilla in Beaumont. It too's on I-10. You can't miss it. The original group of Lupi Tortilla restaurants invites you in for the best Tex-Mex anywhere. You own a car you love. Well, why not let Gulf Coast Auto Shield protect it? Houstonian John Gray invites you to his state-of-the-art facility to introduce you to his specialist team of auto enthusiasts. We promise you'll be impressed. Whether you're looking to massage your original paint to a like-new appearance, apply a ceramic coating, install a paint protection film, nano-ceramic window tint, or new windshield protection called ExoShield, Gulf Coast Auto Shield is where Houston's car people go. Curbed your wheels? Instead of buying new, why not have them repaired? How about a professionally installed radar detector? Gulf Coast Auto Shield does that too. Get a peek inside the shop and look at the services offered by getting online and heading to gcautoshield.com. Better yet, stop by their facility at 11275 South Sam Houston Tollway, just south of the Southwest Freeway, and get a personal tour. Gulf Coast Auto Shield is your place to go for all things exterior. Call them today, 832-930-5655 or gcautoshield.com. The award-winning In-Wheel Time Car Talk Show is available on the most popular podcast channels out there in 30-minute episodes. We realize our 3-hour live show can be difficult to catch in its entirety, so now you can listen every day to a convenient, fresh 30-minute episode. Check us out on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, and Audible, along with a dozen more. In Wheel Time has the most informative automotive guest interviews and new car reviews, along with popular features including Conrad's Car Clinic and This Week in Auto History, along with automotive news headlines. Our live broadcast airs every Saturday, 8 to 11 Central on InWheelTime.com, the iHeart app, and on YouTube. Be sure to say hello when we're broadcasting from the Tailpipes and Tacos Cruise-In, Autorama, and the Houston Auto Show, among others. Now, it's easier than ever to hear about all things automotive all week long. You're invited to join fellow car enthusiasts in becoming part of the ever-growing In Wheel Time Car Talk family. Don't forget those 30-minute podcast episodes on your favorite podcast channel. That's it for this podcast episode of the In Wheel Time Car Show. I'm Don Armstrong, inviting you to join us for our live show every Saturday morning, 8 to 11 a.m. Central on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and our InWheelTime.com website. Podcasts are available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeart Podcast, Podcast Addict, TuneIn, Pandora,